Jance, Carly, James, thank you all for joining me today on Press Day for the mental state.
Hi.
Thank you.
Exciting times. I watched it last night and I love the story and I love how like mental illness, how it shows you a little bit of everything. Family, the way things are going through as a person, as how it affects everybody else. For you guys, like I want to know, like, what are you hoping for the viewers when they watch this? What are you hoping to get out of this film when they first jump right into this? James, we'll start with you first.
Sure, yeah. I mean, I think like for me, I always kind of lean on these three pillars coming out of the story, which is just empathy, compassion, and communication. Hopefully, I think a big thing is that we're not trying to generalize these sort of events and tragedies, and not even necessarily trying to generalize what it's like to go through a mental health crisis like this, but to sort of just bring a light on knowing that we need to have a little bit more compassion from for everyone kind of going through this. And I think the story really shows a lot of people trying. It's also showing a sort of lack of compassion, perhaps from the systems that are in place for people, and hopefully more communication and discussions around resources for a lot of people.
Carly?
Yeah, I mean, I hope that it inspires a chat, I hope that it inspires people to continue the conversation. I hope it inspires people to check in on their kid, check in on their parent, check in on their friend, check in on the person that's on the street that looks like they might need help. I just feel like there's a lot of opportunity to create dialogue surrounding these issues, like James said, to create more systems in place. And it's hitting the tough subjects, but I think that if we start somewhere, the conversation can keep going, and hopefully there will be a solution, in our lifetime to some of these
What
issues.
about you?
Yeah, I mean, the fact that there are places in the world that are modern that don't have these issues proves to me that it is possible, that there is change.
Yeah.
It's not like this is an issue everywhere in all societies. It's like, no, it's you watch this movie, where it's happening.
Mhm.
I want there to be discussions too, and I think that the fact that this is a film that is not a documentary, it's a fictional story that is very real, very realistic, but because it's not an actual, it's not based on any particular thing. I think that it'll actually give people a license to discuss more openly than they might if it was like real.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what I hope, is that people are able to maybe see a different way of going about these things, because you have a lot of people in this world, in this society, that ultimately want the same thing, which is like a safe and healthy functioning world.
Mm.
And everybody is like, it's this problem and it's this problem and it's this problem, and there's so much disagreement on like what the actual solution is or what the issue is. And I think this film touches on a lot of different ones, which is good because it might make somebody think about something in a new way. Like, it's not just about gun control. It's not just about, oh, well, if these people had more money, then it would be fine. It's like, it's everything together at the same time.
Mm.
So
James, as a director and the writer, like, how did you decide to approach this film?
Yeah, I mean, I think the sort of inception of it came from growing up in this sort of society, growing up with, post Columbine, having lockdowns and having rehearsing exit strategies as like a fifth grader, and living with this weird paranoia of something like this perhaps happening, and then seeing Sandy Hook happen as I was coming into age as a sort of young adult, and having thoughts to make a story about this, because I just saw things like the news not really covering these sort of topics with a sort of breadth of empathy across everybody's perspectives the way I wanted to see it. And so I started to have these ideas, and I discussed it with my then girlfriend, now my wife, who's a fantastic actress, Remington Moses. She plays the counselor in the film, actually, Melanie Hansen. She introduced me to Josh Adele, who was a former drama teacher of hers who wrote the play The Mental State. And it just dealt with so many of the topics that I was looking for in a story like this. And he did a fantastic job of the family dynamics and trying to bring compassion to all characters. And he and I met, and our sort of desire for and heart for a story like this were in the same place, and just kind of evolved from there. It just turned into this need to get the story out there. I think, like with every filmmaker and storyteller with their stories. And then I just had a wonderful opportunity with my co-filmmaker Ronnee Swenton, helping along the way, and producers Matt Einstein and Glen Trotiner being very supportive, and the co-writers of Josh Barclay and Jeremy Anderson, and every collaborator just coming together and being really, really bought into the story and the heart of this story. So
you mentioned characters. We have Angela and Andy. This is for Carly and Jance. When you first got like description of these characters, and then you read the script and the story, like what went through your minds?
Yeah, I mean, the character introduction of Angela references something to the extent of like years of pain and loss. So it was a very you know what you're getting into when that's the character description, and it doesn't take long before we realize just how difficult Angela's life is when we meet her with her. She's currently sober, but she's been battling addiction for years after her ex-husband committed suicide. She's estranged from her sister-in-law, who's effectively the other provider for Andy. She's in a relationship that is not really going anywhere, and he uses pills to self-medicate, so that's not a great example for her in her sobriety. She has given herself fully over to God and the church, and I think that is one of her biggest missions when we meet her, is to lead Andy into the church as well, because she believes that will be his salvation for the troubles that he's experiencing. And it's when, I think she firmly believes like God will forgive, and when the church turns their back on her, that's when she has to kind of come up with different means and different instincts on how to survive and save her child, or to attempt to save her child, as opposed to just perish under the weight of it all. So I think, like, to me, Angela was not the prime example of motherhood, and I thought that was interesting about her. She had many faults, many foibles, but it was for me really important not to judge her, and to very simply just have her try her best and come from a place of love for her kid. So it was like distilled down, it was a love story. And that was, that made it entrancing and heartbreaking to navigate.
Yeah, I really loved what you said earlier about how, at a baseline, this movie is like about protecting your loved ones, in so many different ways.
Every character is really protecting those they love. Like that's what every character is doing, is just trying to
that's their whole MO.
Yeah, the best way they know how.
Right.
And the best way that they can, given their resources and circumstances.
And throughout the film, you could see that your characters love each other pretty much to death.
Yeah.
James, I don't want to put you. I want to put you on the spot. What were you looking for when you were casting for these characters? What exactly was like the pinpoint for this?
Well, I was like, I'd love to see an actor named Jance and an actress named Carly, and sure enough, here we are. No, I think like for me, I try to be very open with the characters and everything. So it's not always like one specific thing that I'm looking for, because ultimately, like I can do what I can as a co-writer or as a director to see these characters, but ultimately it's going to be up to the actors to embody these characters and see what they bring in. And when we went through the casting process, just meeting Jance and Carly and seeing how, I mean, they both just gave like amazing auditions. And then I do this sort of weird, unconventional thing, I guess, of doing like a character interview where I try to keep them in character. It's not really like, I don't want it to be confused with some idea of like this method acting that's kind of out there sometimes, but it's just a matter of like talking to them and see where their thoughts are with these characters and if they're connecting with the character. And both of them did a fantastic job through that. And then it was a matter of kind of like talking with them afterwards. And that's what led me to cast them. But I try not to go into with too many like preconceived ideas of what I'm looking for, because it's great to be surprised, because that just means that this character is going to be something even more interesting than I could have thought it to be.
But
So.
I just want to jump in and say, like, that level of openness, that exercise that James did with us at the auditions was such a telltale sign that he was also fluid and not rigid and willing to play and have this kind of openness and discussion to create 3-dimensional, 4-dimensional, 5-dimensional characters. And I think that like that to me, that instilled in me so much trust in James as a director, like straight off, like right off the cuff.
How often do you have you're doing improv in an audition?
Right. Jance, so you have some, you got some powerful scenes too when you're talking to your father in some of the scenes and then your uncle in some of the scenes. Tell us a little bit about that.
About Andy's relationship with
his father and his uncle, and like how even like how your aunt comes into the scene and nobody's there and she sees you talking to pretty much nobody there. Yeah.
Well, that's the really interesting thing about people that die, is that you still have a relationship with them after they die. Like even if they're not around, you still know them. And then what can happen, especially if with tragedy, is that people can start to maybe feel their mother's ghost, or their aunt living in the attic, or people have these experiences where they felt like their loved one who's passed away was speaking to them, and in the case of Andy, of course he was doing that. Of course he was experiencing these spiritual moments with his father, after he actually passed. So it's really sad though, because when when someone dies when you're young, you don't get to know them like in a adult mature sense. So a child who loses a parent, they never got to know them really. So there's a lot of fill in that happens, I think. And fill in of what they should have been, or what you wish they were. And so the guy that Andy was talking to was not actually his father, but it was Andy's idealized version of him, and so that, anytime you start, taking an idealized version of something as fact is dangerous, but it was still comforting. So that's where he went with it. Yeah, it's like, it's so weird getting advice from someone like that, because really it's in his own head. So he's giving himself advice, and it's like, that's probably a spoiler. I should
So, and last question for Carly too, with your scene at the end where you're pretty much like staring at the camera, the bottle of alcohol right next to you, and the camera goes black. What's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, we shot a couple different versions, didn't we, James? We did, didn't we?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
I think we shot a couple different versions of it, but I think that said, we were pretty resolved on the ending that is in the picture, like being the ending, because I think that, you know, this woman is at a crossroads of what she's experienced, where she's going, and how she's going to get there. And to me, I felt it was really important to not make that choice, because I felt compassion for someone going through all that she has been through and all that she's about to go through still and continue to go through for the rest of her life. I felt like it was important to give space to that, because, you know, you never know what someone is going through, and all we can do is have empathy and compassion for them, and hope that they have lifelines around them to help get them through. And in this particular case, she's, you know, she has pushed away and has lost a lot. And I would choose to believe that she's a fighter and she doesn't succumb to the demons of the past. That's what I choose to believe. But, you know, people also make choices when they're desperate for relief.
Yeah.
So I didn't want to judge that. I wanted to hopefully create a sense of determination, but also confusion out of the state that she finds herself in.
To me, that scene is so, like, it reminds me of, you know, like, let's say your house was burning down. Like, there's a moment when all you can do is just watch it, you know, or like, you know, before all of the real life, oh, look, I have to go to work tomorrow, I have to like feed the dog and all this stuff. It's like, sometimes it's literally just like complete awe of like your circumstances, you know, and that is the difficult emotion, is like not knowing what to do.
Amazing. Yeah. So again, I want to, this was great. And I can't wait for the viewers and the listeners to go check this movie out. I want to thank you for joining me today on Press Day.
Of course.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for watching. Thanks for having us.
Have a great day, everybody.